What is going on, everybody? I am back today to talk about the newest Netflix original movie that everyone is talking about right now called It's What's Inside. And I knew nothing about this movie before I went in to watch it, other than I saw some people compare it to Bodies, Bodies, Bodies and the science fiction film Coherence. And I've seen both films. I hated Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. I thought it was grating and irritating. The character writing was awful. I didn't find it suspenseful. The cinematography was relatively poor. I liked Rachel Sennett's performance, but that was about it, and I just left the theater finding it to be relatively bland. And Coherence is a super interesting science fiction movie. Not everything about it works for me, but I really liked the way that they build up tension and suspense throughout. And so combining those two concepts was fascinating to me. And this movie also stars James Morosini, whose directorial debut came out not too long ago with Patton Oswalt, and I absolutely loved it. I thought that it was a fantastic movie, and I really enjoyed his performance. And so that was enough to get me to check it out. And the movie I'm going to tell you about today is It's What's Inside. It's What's Inside is directed by Greg Jardin. A pre-wedding party descends into an existential nightmare when an estranged friend shows up with a mysterious suitcase. So I went into this movie blind, didn't really know much about it, and everyone's saying go into the movie blind, and I hated this. I thought it was absolutely atrocious, and I think that it's everything that's wrong with Netflix currently. I don't like saying this about movies, but this felt like you took a bunch of concepts from films that already exist, put it into ChatGPT and say write a script for me, and it felt like the worst cringiest dialogue written by like a TikTok influencer that you could imagine. For a film that the entire crux of the movie, which I'm not going to spoil it right now, I'm going to talk about spoilers later and I'll give you a warning, but for a film that the entire crux of the movie relies so heavily on characterization and understanding character motivations, this movie writes some of the worst characters I've seen in a film all year long. They have no personality. They all feel exactly the same. They're irritating and obnoxious. They have no interesting personality traits that you want to attach yourself onto, which makes the movie an unbearable watch. And I'll talk about it a little bit more when I break the movie down. As I said, eventually I'll get into spoiler territory, but right now we're in spoiler-free territory. Just going to give you a brief rundown, tell you my thoughts, and then I'll skip to that part and give you a warning. So this movie, we're introduced to a couple at the beginning. They're bickering, things in their relationship aren't going very well, and they're going to a friend's wedding party, and they drive to this house in the middle of nowhere, and we're introduced to this enormous cast of characters, and they've all known each other for years and years, and there is a guy that is a part of their friend group who shows up unexpectedly, and there's all this stuff going around about what happened to him and what's going on in his life, and he comes into the house and he asks all of them if they want to play a game, and they all sit down to play this game together, and everything with this movie, the entire crux, happens after this game is played initially. And that is all I can tell you about the movie without spoiling it. So like I said, I thought this movie was awful. I don't have really anything positive to say other than it looks nice. The visuals, there's a lot of attention to detail in the cinematography and the lighting. There's a lot of cool editing transitions in the film, and I liked that. There's some things I can't talk about without spoiling the film, so I'll discuss it a little bit later, but there's a lot of attention to detail in the lighting in specific scenes to give you information as a viewer, which I liked that. I think that it creates an immersive experience and allows you as the viewer to be kind of sucked in because of the attention to detail with the cinematography. But that is the only positives that I have. Like I said, the big issue I have with this movie, it completely and totally lacks great characterization. The characters are underwritten. Their motivations are really shallow. Even the two characters we're introduced to initially, this couple that's bickering, there's nothing much more than a surface level conversation about this couple and their relationship not working, and clearly they shouldn't really be together in the first place. They don't seem to have each other's best interests at heart, and so it makes it impossible to root for them. And then we're introduced to this entire group of characters who, like, each and every one of their personality traits feels very stereotypical, and it feels very much like a caricature of a human being and less of an actual person. And I understand that when it comes to the context of like satire. If you want to look at a brilliant film that is a caricature of human beings and less of human beings feeling authentic. Look at John Waters' Polyester and the character that Divine plays, and all the characters in that movie kind of mimicking suburban life, and just how brilliant that movie is when it comes to creating caricatures. None of those people are supposed to feel like real human beings. They are essentially overblown ideas of how we perceive people. This movie is trying to do the same thing, but it does it in a far less interesting way, because none of the stereotypes or things surrounding these characters are done in a thoughtful or intellectual way. The humor is so bland and on the nose. The whole TikTok influencer trope and the way that they talk to one another is just so incredibly grating. The final scene in this movie, they try to do like a wink and nod at the camera, and it is just insufferable. It's not funny. Like, it just feels like it's written by someone who thinks they're the smartest person in the world, and they're not. And that's what's really irritating about watching this film as a whole, is that everything about this movie, it thinks it's so much smarter than it actually is, but it's just doing something that a million other movies have already done in just a far less interesting way. And that is all I can talk about without spoiling the movie. So right now, from this point on, I'm going to talk about spoilers in the film. If you haven't seen the movie and you want to watch it, go watch it and come back and watch my spoiler-filled thoughts. And so right now, I'm going to get into talking about spoilers. So the game that they play in this movie that this guy brings in is they attach these things to their heads and they are able to switch bodies. And no one believes it at first. It happens. It freaks everybody out, and then they think it's the coolest thing ever. Well, of course, they switch bodies. They play this game where they try to guess who's in each other's bodies, and someone eventually dies. And after they die, it's all about the mystery as to what's going on. What are these characters' motivations? And so they do things in the film, like they attach Polaroid snapshots to people after it's been discussed who is who. And then if we don't know who's who, they'll cut to this set of shots where the characters are lit in red. And so you know who's inside whose body until you don't. And the problem I have with the movie is they have all these inventive, creative ways of showing you which character is which until they just don't do it anymore. And there are moments where the director wants to disguise characters intentionally, but it feels like it gets lost in when it's supposed to be shown and when it's not. So it takes away from a lot of the dramatic tension in the film, because you just forget who's who, because these characters all feel exactly the same. There's no personality traits or anything that really distinguishes them from one another. So if you don't know their names and you don't know much about them, it's hard to keep track of who's who. And I think an entire rewrite of the beginning of the script to get a little bit more context to each one of these characters and provide more when it comes to their motivations would have made for a much more effective experience overall. But instead you get underwritten characters that are introduced in a way that is so bland and conventional. And I saw so many positive reviews for this, and it really just perplexes me how many people have become content with mediocrity. And I understand we live in a world where it's really easy to create movies and just kind of shell them out on streaming services, but like, there are so many incredible works of film being made now as well that are unique and well thought out and just great concepts. And this just felt like a movie that pulled from a ton of other movies that just did it in a way that was far less interesting. And that's really disappointing, because I do think there's some talent involved here, and I think there's a potential in this idea. I really liked where it was going. The problem is execution, and everything in film is execution. I found this movie to be incredibly grating. It's probably going to end up on my worst films of the year list, and I probably will never watch this movie again. So have you seen It's What's Inside? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I thought this movie was awful. I hated everything about it, and I don't expect to ever watch it again. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.